Karina Stani, and my colleagues are Eva Wallner, Karina Url, Jakob Wirksel, and Benjamin Fellner. We are Team Austria, and we study e-health at the University of Applied Science, Joanneum in Graz. It's a pleasure to be here today. The aim of our presentation, of course, is to present you our project. We have developed a project called Generic Monitoring Application for people with coronary artery disease, short GeMAC. We have divided our presentation into 5 parts. First, I'd like to give you a short overview about our objectives. Then Eva will go on with the hardware. Karina will talk about the database. After that, Jakob will focus on the software, and finally Benjamin will talk about the web user interface. We will try to answer your question after the presentation. So let's start with the objectives of GeMAC. Our basic idea was to measure some vital signs with some sensors. So we ordered an e-health sensor complete kit and an Arduino, as well as a Raspberry starter kit. This e-health sensor complete kit contains 10 typical sensors, but we will talk about this later. However, we needed a specific purpose, and we determined to focus on one special disease, and we decided to measure vital signs on patients who has been diagnosed with the coronary artery disease. I will examining this disease later in more detail. GeMAC should be used to for the preliminary assessment of critical situations, and as well as to identify the medical condition of the patient, and to maybe identify if the patient has a heart attack. So our target groups are, of course, patients who have been diagnosed with CAD and or who have already had a heart attack. We distinguish between bedridden and mobile patients, and we are planning a continuous measuring on bedridden patients, and on mobile patients we measure continuously during the night and as often as necessary by the day. Our prototype should only be tested on healthy people, but in further consequence, of course, it can be used on ill people. So as I mentioned earlier, I will talk about the coronary artery disease. We choose CAD because this is the most common heart disease in Europe, and so we think we should do something for that. And this disease is a disease in which plaque builds up in the coronary arteries, like you can see it here. This is plaque, and this is the coronary artery. And these arteries supply oxygen-rich blood to the heart muscle. And if there is the plaque, this narrows the arteries, and then the supply of the oxygen-rich blood is reduced or even blocked, and so a heart attack can occur. And there are symptoms for a heart attack: feeling of tightness in the chest, blood pressure fluctuations, irregular abnormal ECG, cardiac arrhythmia, breathing problems, and specific pain in the heart area, which can radiate to the back left arm or to the neck. And in women, there is a different symptoms. There are breathlessness, weakness, and upset stomach, physical state, or exhaustion. And also in diabetics, there is a special symptom. This is high blood sugar level. So, and as a result, we decided to use 5 sensors from the e-health sensor kit, so we can detect if there is a heart attack. And this is the pulse oximeter, airflow sensor, electrocardiogram sensor, the glucometer sensor for people who have diabetics, and also the blood pressure sensor. But Eva will explain these sensors in more detail later. So we have some objectives. We wanted to send the measured data from the sensor to the single board, computer, store the data on a database via Wi-Fi, create a web application where physicians, carers, or of course the patients can have an overview of the data, and we want also to analyze the data and make alerts if there is a critical situation. And what my colleagues will tell you now what we have already accomplished.
We already heard yesterday from our colleagues from Finland what a Raspberry Pi is, but I have already prepared my presentation, so I will tell it again. You will never forget it. We have a chip card size Raspberry Pi, so it's this size. It's just the first shield over there, so you can see we have a prototype. We did it. Yeah. And this facts about them. It has 500 megahertz processor, and model B, which we are using, has a RAM of 512 megabyte. It has 2 USB ports, 1 HDMI interface. Then as well we have the micro USB 5-volt power supply and a normal network interface. It doesn't have a hard disk drive or solid state drive. We use for this the SD card as HDD, and as well we have the OS on it. And the OS is Debian with a Linux kernel. Then the second shield we have is the Raspberry Pi to Arduino Shield's connection bridge. And you know, as the name says, we can connect different types of shields to our Arduino, and in our case to our Raspberry. That's the third one. So we have the eHealth sensor shield. This red one, as you can see, we can connect all the sensors to it, but I will show you later to you. Then the fourth one is just the connection shield for the Wi-Fi. And the fifth one is the Wi-Fi. So it's a roofing network, and it integrates the 11B and G standard, TCP/IP stack, and the real-time clock. So as you can see, here are our sensors connected. We have just 5 of 9 sensors, but we thought it's the important one for the coronary artery diseases, which we are using. So we have the blood pressure up there. Yep. Then temperature we are not using at the moment, but we could use it. We could compile it. Then we have the ECG connection, the airflow connection, and pulse oximeter connection. There is someone. Oh, there's the airflow. No, glucometer, I'm sorry. And we have 4 more sensors, like we have a sweating sensor, an EMG, then we have EMG, the temperature, which I already mentioned, and a position sensor. But as I told you, in our case, we won't need it. So then I will describe the sensor shortly. I think everybody will know it, how they work by general, but I will just give you a short overview. So we have the pulse oximeter. I have also an example here. I mean, it's on the picture as well. And it's just a little chip, and you put it on your finger, and then it will give you some light. We have 2 light waves. It's 660 nanometer, that's the red light spectra, and the 940 nanometer is the infrared light spectra. So, and it depends on what is absorbed by the light, and the difference is shown as the data. Then we have the airflow sensor. This one. You just put it via the thread behind your ears, like I won't show it to you, but you know how I mean it. And then you get the data from the Raspberry, and it looks like this wave here, so you can see how you're breathing and how the waves work. And then it's connected to the database, and you just get the normal data and the wave as well, whatever you want. Then we have the ECG, but as it was mentioned yesterday from our colleagues from Finland, I won't tell it to you again, another thing. So I hope you know it works and you see how it's connected, everything. Then the next one is the glucometer. It shows you the glucose in the blood, the concentration. And you know, you have to put a drop of blood on a strip and then it calculates your glucose level. It's measured in milligram per deciliter or in millimole per liter. And you know, as the diabetics have high blood pressure, if you have coronary artery diseases, you have even higher blood pressure. Glucose in blood. And the last one is the blood pressure. I didn't show it. It's not really important, but the blood pressure is like this one, and you have to measure it by your upper arm. We have the systolic and the systolic pressure. The systolic is, you know, as the heart beats, and the diastolic is if it relaxes. And we have all the sensors. The first three are real-time sensors, but the last two, we first have to measure the data via these devices, and after this you have to connect it to the Raspberry, and then you can compile the data and everything and change data, because otherwise it wouldn't work. So the first three are real-time.
So in the next part of our presentation, I would like to talk about the database. So let me first give you an overview. Here you can see the entity relationship diagram. So we have decided to store our data in a MySQL database, and we have worked with the MySQL workbench. As you can see, we thought that it would be good to create tables for all persons involved. So this means for the patients, the physicians and the carers. We've also created tables for the whole data we will measure and for the standard values of all sensors in use. And then we have created one table for the Raspberry configuration and one for the administrator. So let's consider this module in more detail now. First, I would like to start by looking at the patient table. So how you can see, we have one column for the patient ID. Then we have several columns for personal information like the last name, the forename, and the date of birth. There's also one column for the social security number and for authorization data, so username and password. As you can see, the columns of the physician and the carer table are structured in the same way. And the table called physician has patient illustrates, like the name says, the connection between physician and patient. And there you can see a column called start date and one called end date. And these columns are important because a patient can of course change his physician and he's not forced to have always the same. How you can gather from the diagram, the carer table is constructed in the same way. So the carer has patient table also shows the connection between carer and patient. Now I would like to deal with the measurement data. So we have created one table for each sensor. So we have 5 tables for the measured data. And every table contains information about the point in time, about the measurement, and of course to which patient it refers to. Then, like my colleague has told you before, we have planned to store our data, so the standard values, in the database so that we can send out an emergency call if it's necessary. So the aim is to send out an alert when the value is higher or lower than a certain limit. And yeah, however, we haven't implemented this yet. But we have realized the foundation for implementing this feature. So we have created the tables already. And the columns of the tables include the point in time, the minimum and maximum value, and the patient it refers to. Date and time are necessary because standard values can change. So, for example, the health situation of the patient can enhance, and then some standard values can change too. At least I want to elaborate on the Raspberry config table. So this table is needed for the configuration with the GeMAC program on the Raspberry Pi. And the table provides intervals for measurements of the different sensors. And you can also find the information about when the data is sent to the database. Well, and the primary key is shown via the MAC address of the Raspberry Pi.
Hey everyone, I'm, as one of my colleagues has already mentioned, I was responsible for the software, implementation of the software, and I want to explain you the basic functionality which our software currently has and what you will be supposed to do if you choose our project. First of all, I will tell you some general information. All of our software on the Raspberry Pi is written in C++, and all the functions which are needed to read the data of the sensors have been provided by cooking hacks in kind of a library. As we want to use our sensors simultaneously, we have to use different threads. Each thread is responsible for one sensor. And here you can see some examples of our threads, for example, the pulse sensor thread or the ECG thread. And firstly, data will be measured. Then, after one measurement, the red data should be stored into our remote database. And depending on the configuration which is stored in the database, each thread waits a different time between two measurements. To send the data, we have decided to put a PHP file on a web server which receives our sensor data and stores it into the database. Okay, this was our main idea, but this was easier said than done because our Wi-Fi module is not thread able. That means that it is not able to execute several HTTP requests simultaneously, but only one after another. And also one measurement takes a relatively long time. So first we have to connect to open the connection, then we have to send the data, then we have to wait for a response of the web server and close the connection. So our current solution is not to send the red sensor data not directly from the sensor thread to the web server, but attach all measured data of the sensor threads to a queue, and this queue will be processed by a special thread, the sending thread. And this sending thread takes the first data of the queue and tries to send it to the web server, but only if the sending of the data was successful, this data will be removed in the queue, otherwise the thread tries to send the current data again. And lastly, if the program will be terminated, all data which have already been measured but not yet sent, so all data which are currently in the queue will be stored in a file and will be restored in the queue when the program starts the next time. And what we wish from you to do on the Raspberry, if you choose our project, is to improve our code and to implement the code for the read meter and the blood pressure. And I think there are many things to do because our group is not the best in programming C++, so we can improve our code. And now I'll pass the floor to my colleague, Benjamin Fellner, who will talk about our web user interface.
Thank you, Jakob. Hi everybody, I'm Benjamin, as you can see here, and now I'm talking about the web user interface. Yes, we create this web user interface with PHP. This is the short form for personal homepage tours. And PHP is a scripting language which is primarily used for creating dynamic websites. And we took this because it's a free software, and it also is characterized by database support. The users of the web user interface are the patients, possibly the guardians of the patients, then the physicians, the carers, and the administrator of the database. We gave every user username and a password for the authorization, and yeah. And then here you see the login page. You can choose which user you are by a drop-down menu. Here, by clicking on this, you can choose if you are an administrator, a carer, a patient, or a physician. And then you must key in your username and password. If it is not correct, there comes the field which says user not available. And if it is correct, you are click on the login button, and then you will be forwarded to the next page. This is a view of the admin page. Here you can see we have the patient, the physician, and the carer. And it's also a drop-down menu where you choose which patient you want, which physician you want, which carer you want. And by clicking on the load button, then you come to the next view. And I took the physician view. The physician first clicked on the load patient button of Hans Knaus, and then he sees the patient data, where he comes from, his telephone number, and what's his birthday. And by clicking on this button, you also see the measurements of the pulse, of the airflow, the electrocardiogram, and the glucose. And then you can screen up and down here, and he sees the measurements with the time, what pulse and what oxygen acceleration. Yes, and on every page there's also a logout button and a back button to come back to the content. Okay, thank you everybody. I hope you are interested in it, and we invite you to come in our group and help us with this project. Thank you.